Greetings. Thank you for joining us again here at Just Conspiracy, where we just wish to conspire with other good people of this planet to leave a better world for future generations than the world we all grew up in. Hopefully you will join us in this conspiracy. We are going back over the Constitution, this document. The last time we went over this document, we went over proper nouns. And I said a couple of things that some people challenged me on, so I'm just going to prove it by going through the document again. Now, I'm going to go through two parts this evening. The first one will be on citizens, how senators were elected, and how the president was elected, because that's one of the things I've been challenged on. And then the other part will be what your constitutional rights are. Both videos will probably have this very same opening segment, and they're both going to be released differently to keep the time down. Let's go ahead and get into it. Right here, Section 8. Okay, this is the second video for tonight. I'm just on a roll, huh? I don't have a bunch of things pulled up on my computer, so I might have to look a couple of things up in what I wish to teach you about the Constitution tonight. I'm kind of excited to do this. I've gotten some people requesting this, but we're going to talk about the rights inside of the Constitution and your constitutional rights. A lot of people don't know what they are. A lot of people are really confused about this, and it's not a big surprise because media and educational systems and really just society is kind of broken. So people can't know what they're not taught. So let me teach you what your rights are and what their duties are. Because the Constitution has some very, very valuable rights. And if these rights were upheld, just the rights in the Constitution, we would have a much better society and a much better place to raise our children in. So let's get started. As you can see, we got the Constitution. I was going through some other stuff in the other video. Okay, Section 8. I told you in the last video we were going to go over this. The Congress shall have power to lay taxes and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excise, to pay the debts, to borrow money on the credit of the United States, to regulate commerce with foreign nations and among the several states and with the Indian tribes, to establish uniform rules of naturalization and uniform laws on the subject of bankruptcies throughout the United States, to coin money, regulate the value thereof, and of foreign coin, and fix the standard of weights and measures, to provide for the punishment of counterfeiting the security and current coin of the United States, to establish post office and post roads, to constitute tribunals inferior to the Supreme Court, to define and punish piracies and felonies committed on the high seas, to declare war, grant letters of marque and reprisal, to raise and support armies, but no appropriation of money to that use shall be for a longer than 2 years. I don't think they follow that one. To provide and maintain a navy, to make rules for the government and regulations of the land and naval forces. To make rules for the government. That's interesting. To provide for calling forth the militia to execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrection, and repel invasions. To provide for organizing, arming, and disciplining the militia. This is what Congress has the authority to do. To exercise exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever over such district not exceeding 10 miles square. Not exceeding 10 miles square. And for those of y'all who don't know, that is Washington, D.C. So Congress has the right to legislate Washington, D.C. because that is the United States of America. To make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers and all other powers vested by this Constitution in the government of the United States or in any department thereof. See, the interesting thing I find about Section 8 is not what's in it, it's actually what's left out. Because here's what's left out. They don't have the right to legislate laws over you. They don't have the right to legislate laws over man and woman. They only have the right to legislate laws over the government, over governmental entities, and over governmental departments. Okay? Now, if you wish to contract with one of those entities, with one of those departments, with one of those government agencies, if you wish to act as a civil officer, they're not going to stop you. They're not going to stop you because that's exactly what gives them power, authority, and control. And that's exactly how a communistic state works, is everybody's a part of it. Everybody's a part of it. Nobody can escape it. Think about it. Think about it. Here are some of your rights. It starts in Section 9. This is what Congress cannot do. Okay? Section 9, Congress can't do. All right. Right here. No capitalization or other direct tax shall be laid. Let's look up what that word means, because I can't even really pronounce it that well. Capitation. Numeration by the head. A numbering of persons, a tax or imposition upon each head or person, a poll tax. So this is basically like an income tax. It's where you tax everybody. In the original Constitution, this was something that Congress could not do. Okay, but then again, if they think about it and they agree with themselves, by 2/3 of a vote, they can actually take that out of there, and that's what happened. That's another story for another day. Learn your history. No bill of attainder, no ex post facto law. So these are things that they cannot do. Here's Section 10. Now, this is what they're telling the states that the states cannot do. And so what they're telling the states that they can't do, they can't make anything but gold and silver coin a tender in payment. The states cannot create their own currency banking system like the Federal Reserve. Only the federal government can do that. The states used to have their own currency, but it was backed by gold. It was gold and silver certificates. I believe that this was in a video I made recently about the Federal Reserve called Funny Money on News Humor. So if you don't know about News Humor, you should go check it out. I'll link it right there. Okay. Again, the states can't pass any bill of attainders, ex post facto laws, or laws impairing the obligations of contracts. And that is probably one of the most important rights that you can have right there. There's no law impairing the obligation of contracts. Okay? And an ex post facto law is basically they can't go back and create a law for something that you've already done and then charged you with it, when it wasn't a law when they charged you with it. And an ex post facto law can also be like no pre-crime. There's not pre-crime in the United States. There's not supposed to be. You have a right to not have pre-crime. So the law impairing the obligation of contracts, right there, any selling of drugs, any selling of illicit substances, that's a contract. When one individual offers another individual money for a good or a service, that's a contract. You shouldn't have anybody locked up for illegal substances because it's not against the law. Remember, the Constitution of the United States is the supreme law of the land, and we'll get to that later. Now, pass, the ex post facto laws. When you're charging somebody with, intent to distribute, that's a pre-crime. How do you know what somebody intends to do or not? You could be Snoop Dogg and just have 8 pounds of weed for yourself. I mean, I'm pretty sure that Snoop Dogg got charged with 4 pounds of weed, and they knocked it down to simple possession because he was saying, hey, for real, I'm a rapper. Why do I need to sell weed? You don't make any money off of selling weed. You make money off of selling coke. Why do I need to sell 4 pounds of weed? I just bought this for me and all my peoples to smoke. I don't know. That's just how it worked out. Let's keep going on with the rights. All right, this was actually from the last video. Here we get to the 4th article. In my opinion, these are probably some of the most important rights as well. In fact, I think that these are the most important rights besides your obvious God-given right to contract. You have the full faith and credit clause, which means that every state will recognize the other state's legal authority and they'll uphold it. And then you have the citizens of each state shall be entitled to all privileges and immunities of citizens in the several states. So this basically means when you live in California and it's legal to smoke weed in California, you still have that right when you go to Florida, or you go to Washington, or you go to South Carolina. Whatever you can do in one state and whatever you have the right to do in one state, you can do that in all of the states. So when they start locking people up or arresting people for intent to distribute marijuana, it's really a licensing issue. It's nothing against the law. And licensing, everybody who watches this channel probably already knows, it's when they turn a right into a privilege and, give you the privilege of doing something that would otherwise be illegal, but not unlawful. So just keep that in mind. And this is my absolute favorite right for in the Constitution, and that is the United States shall guarantee to every state in this union a republican form of government. And if you don't know why I believe that that is the best right, you should go and watch the first video I ever put out on this channel. And then it goes on to say something else. And shall protect each of them against invasion, and on application of the legislature or of the executive, when the legislature cannot be convened, against domestic violence. See, if you understand what a republican form of government is, then you understand you can be in your own state of mind. And that the United States government is supposed to protect that. And they don't, because people don't understand the Constitution. Now let's get to a part where, it's not in effect, it's not in force today, but it's poetic. The Constitution and the laws of the United States, which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made, or which shall be made under the authority of the United States, shall be the supreme law of the land, and the judges in every state shall be bound thereby. Anything in the Constitution or laws of any state to the contrary notwithstanding. And what they're saying there is that if they enact any statutes or treaties that are repugnant to the Constitution, it doesn't hold up. It doesn't hold up at all. Both of the United States, okay, wait, let me back up a second. The senators and representatives before mentioned, and the members of the several state legislatures, and all executive and judicial officers, both of the United States and of the several states, shall be bound by oath or affirmation to support this Constitution. So they are bound by oath or affirmation to support the Constitution. So when they start violating the Constitution, technically they're committing war on the United States, and they cannot hold office if they commit war on the United States. You want me to show you where that's written? It's in the second article. The President, Vice President, and all other civil officers of the United States shall be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. But here's the thing. They don't hold each other accountable. Not at all. And just to illustrate that point, because this is all a left-right paradigm, I talked about the Supreme Court and what the Supreme Court is, because the Supreme Court is the Supreme Court of the United States, because we're supposed to be a nation of laws that govern men, and not men that govern other men and women, not men and women who govern other people. And that's why they made the Court of Justice, the Supreme Court, not the legislature, not the executive branch, but the court of law. They made that the Supreme Court in this government. But nobody understands it, so we can't enforce it. In all cases affecting ambassadors, other public ministers, and counsel, Supreme Court shall have original jurisdiction. Now, there was a case, Marbury versus Madison, back in 1803, and this Supreme Court case basically said that the Supreme Court can decide whether statutes are constitutional or not. That's the basic rule that kind of emerged from this. But one of the things that got challenged in that Supreme Court case was Marbury had an order, I think, from President Jefferson, and he wished to execute that order. And Madison, when he became president, because Jefferson did not execute the order, he said he wasn't going to do it. So Marbury sued him, and he took the original writ to the Supreme Court of the United States. Not SCOTUS, not Supreme Court, not
Supreme Court. It was Supreme
Court. Because the word supreme was describing the type of court. It was the highest court in the land. Now, when you capitalize supreme and you make it Supreme Court like SCOTUS of the United States, that is obviously a proper noun. And we went over that in my first video. I'll link it here if you don't know about it. So, but you should go and check it out if you haven't seen it before. So when they're talking about the Supreme Court, they are talking about an inferior court in which Congress had created. So right here, Congress has the power to constitute tribunals inferior to the Supreme Court. So when they make a name like Supreme Court and capitalize it, make it a proper noun, it's inferior to the Supreme Court of the United States. I know that's really confusing. They make a lot of this stuff confusing so that people don't really know how to read it, and that's why a lot of us don't know what our rights are. But when you think about it, what this section's saying right here in Article 3, Section 2, it's saying, and what the Marbury versus Madison case was saying, when they were impeaching President Trump and Congress issued a summons to produce their court's documentation, and President Trump said, well, I'm not going to follow that. And then they took it to the district court, and that's going to be appealed. And then they take it to the appellate court, and they're probably going to appeal it from there. And then it will go to the Supreme Court. It should have gone to the Supreme Court originally. And that's how uneducated the American people are. But better yet, that's how uneducated your politicians are. Unless they're just playing a game. You know, because those are the only two options. They're playing you for a fool, or they don't actually know themselves. And I'm going to go with the guess, with just an educated guess. I'm going to say they probably know. I'm going to say that because every single senator, every single congressman is getting is handed the book Interpretations and Analysis of the Constitution of the United States of America. It's about 2,000 pages thick. 12.5% of it is on the 14th Amendment alone. That should tell you something. If you don't understand how our world and how our government works, how do you expect to teach your children? Just a question. Anyways, it is really, really late. Thanks for staying up with me. Hope y'all like the t-shirt, if y'all didn't notice it already. I'll talk to you later.
Dad, you're still awake? Oh, y'all go subscribe to New Sumo before so that we can get the party really starting. Okay? And also leave a like, subscribe, and click that bell to never miss another video. Okay?
How many people are over News Humor?
And those, I can't remember how many subscribers.
Almost 100?
Almost 100. So before we get to 100, I gotta get to that party. Bye.
But what's interesting to note is being a citizen of the United States is being a civil officer of the United States. And remember, Congress can only regulate the United States. And that's it. They can only regulate government and government agencies. And that is exactly how they regulate people is because they consider you, if you consider yourself to be a citizen, a 14th Amendment citizen, and that's another story for another day, but they consider you a civil officer.
Important work. But as leaders, we are not the most important people here today. It is the civil society leaders who, in many ways, are going to have the more lasting impact. Because, as the saying goes, the most important title is not president or prime minister. The most important title is citizen. It is citizens